Hello everyone and welcome back to the True Crime David channel. I'm David, your guide through the darkest corners of human nature, and today we're stepping into a story where a person you love has been living a double life. Would you stay or walk away? Let's start with Emily Parker never expected her marriage to become a nightmare. For years she believed Richard Parker was the perfect husband. Charming, successful, devoted. But that illusion shattered the night she uncovered his disgusting secret. What she found hidden inside their home was something so disturbing, so unforgivable, that it made her question everything she thought she knew about the man she had vowed to love forever. Now, with her heart pounding and danger closing in, Emily has only one choice: expose the truth before Richard realizes she's onto him. But he's always been one step ahead, watching, waiting. And if he finds out what she knows, she might not make it out alive. Emily Parker believes she had everything she could ever ask for: a stable marriage, a loving husband, and a quiet life in a peaceful neighborhood. For 10 years, she had stood by Richard's side, supporting his career, managing their home, and cherishing the small joys of life. Their marriage wasn't the kind that made headlines, but it was comfortable, predictable, and, at least from the outside, built on trust. She would wake up every morning to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, courtesy of Richard, and they would spend a few minutes together before heading off to their respective jobs. Emily to her classroom of second graders and Richard to his accounting firm. It was the routine of a couple who had settled into a quiet rhythm of life, but routines can be deceiving. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible. Richard had always been a man of habits, someone who followed a strict schedule. He left for work at the same time every morning, took his lunch break at the same cafe, and came home no later than 6 o'clock in the evening. He never left his belongings scattered around, never misplaced his keys, and never gave Emily any reason to doubt his reliability. Yet over the past few months, something had shifted. It started with small things: missed calls that he never mentioned, messages that he would quickly clear from his phone, sudden nights of exhaustion despite having done nothing out of the ordinary. When Emily asked if he was feeling okay, he dismissed her concerns with a tired smile and blamed it on work stress. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But then there were the late nights. Richard, who had once been so particular about coming home on time, suddenly had urgent projects that kept him at the office long past dinner. When Emily pressed for details, his answers were vague, riddled with half-truths that left her with more questions than the clarity. It wasn't just the late nights, it was the way he looked at her now, almost as if he were seeing through her instead of at her. Conversations that used to flow with ease now felt forced, and his once affectionate gestures had grown mechanical, as if he were playing the role of a devoted husband rather than genuinely being one. Emily wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. She had seen too many of her friends ruin their relationships over baseless suspicions. People changed, stress took its toll, and marriages went through rough patches. She told herself this over and over again, but the unease refused to leave her. It gnawed at her, kept her awake at night, and planted a seed of doubt that she couldn't ignore. One evening, as she folded laundry in their bedroom, she noticed Richard's phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was an unknown number. Emily wasn't one to pry, but something in her gut told her that this wasn't just a work call. Richard was in the shower, the sound of running water masking any noise she made. Before she could stop herself, she reached for the phone and turned the screen on. Her heart skipped a beat. The message was brief, almost cryptic. "Same time tomorrow." There was no name, no indication of who it was from, but it was enough to send a chill down Emily's spine. Her hands trembled as she placed the phone back exactly as it was, her mind racing. She told herself not to panic, that it could be something harmless, a client, a colleague, maybe even a friend. But why was it saved under an unknown number? Why had Richard never mentioned it? The doubt that had been simmering in the back of her mind for weeks now threatened to consume her. That night, as Richard slept beside her, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had spent a decade with this man, shared her deepest secrets with him, built a life on the foundation of love and trust. And yet in that moment, she realized something terrifying. She no longer knew who he was. Emily had never considered herself a suspicious person. She had always believed that trust was the foundation of any marriage, and she had spent years building that foundation with Richard. But as she sat in their dimly lit bedroom, staring at his laptop screen, her entire world seemed to shift beneath her feet. She hadn't meant to invade his privacy. In fact, she had never once felt the need to check his devices. Richard had always been an open book, until recently. Lately, the secrecy had become impossible to ignore. He guarded his phone like a lifeline, took his laptop to work even when he didn't need it, and changed passwords that he had once openly shared with her. It was these small, unsettling changes that led Emily to this moment. That evening, Richard had carelessly left his laptop open on the desk. Emily had only meant to close it, but the moment her eyes flickered over the screen, she saw something that made her heart stop. An unfamiliar email account was open, filled with messages she had never seen before. Her pulse quickened. Who was he emailing? Why hadn't he ever mentioned this account? The unease that had been gnawing at her for weeks suddenly grew into full-blown dread. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled down. At first, the messages seemed harmless. Confirmation emails, unread newsletters, spam. But then she saw the folder labeled private. Something about the way it sat there, almost too obvious, yet deliberately hidden, sent a chill down her spine. She hesitated, her conscience screaming at her to stop. But her instincts urged her forward. With a deep breath, she clicked on the folder. What she saw made her stomach churn. Hundreds of messages filled the screen, each more disturbing than the last. Some were filled with cryptic conversations. Others contained links that she didn't dare open. But the images, those were what made her blood run cold. They were disgusting, grotesque, the kind of thing that no decent person would ever be involved in. She felt her breath hitch in her throat, bile rising in her stomach. Her hands shook as she scrolled, unable to comprehend what she was looking at. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be Richard. She wanted to believe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe spam, something he had no involvement in. But the further she looked, the more undeniable the truth became. These weren't just random emails. They were carefully crafted messages, exchanges between Richard and people she didn't know. People who seemed to share his secret interests. Emily pushed herself away from the desk as if the laptop itself were tainted. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in on her. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to get away from this horrible discovery. But as she moved toward the door, she froze. Noise from downstairs. The sound of the front door unlocking. Richard was home. Panic gripped her as she looked around the room. She couldn't let him see her like this, shaken, horrified, filled with the knowledge of his disgusting secret. She had to act normal. She had to pretend nothing had changed. Swallowing back her fear, she took a deep breath and forced herself to move. She quickly shut the laptop, adjusted the chair, and walked out of the room just as Richard stepped inside the house. "Hey, babe," he called out casually, setting his keys on the counter. Emily forced a smile, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Hey." She had never been a good liar, but tonight she had no choice, because now she was living with a stranger. Why was he keeping these files? What was he doing when he left the house late at night? And the most horrifying question of all, had he done something worse than just watching? A nauseating fear twisted in her gut. She had married a man she no longer knew. A man who, for all she could tell, was dangerous. She jumped at the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Richard wasn't supposed to be home yet. Her body went into full panic mode as she frantically closed the folders, shut down the computer, and rushed to the kitchen, forcing herself to act normal. The front door opened and Richard stepped in, a slight frown on his face. "You're home early," Emily said, keeping her voice steady. He studied her for a moment before shrugging. "Yeah, slow day at work. Thought I'd come back and relax." Her heart slammed against her chest, but she smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Sounds good." Richard lingered for a moment before walking past her toward the bedroom. Emily swallowed hard. Had he noticed something? Did he know what she had just done? She couldn't risk staying quiet any longer. She needed a plan, and she needed to get out. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the kitchen counter, her mind racing. She had spent the past few hours uncovering the horrifying truth about Richard, and now he was home early, moving through the house as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She couldn't stay here. Not now. Not after what she had seen. Richard's voice echoed from the bedroom. "Hey, Em, where's my laptop charger?" Her throat felt dry. He never asked her about his things. He always knew exactly where they were. Was he testing her? Did he suspect she had gone through his computer? Forcing herself to sound normal, she called back, "I think it's in the living room." She heard his footsteps heading in that direction. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he might hear it. She had to get out of the house before he found out what she knew. But she couldn't just walk out the door. That would be too obvious. Her mind raced for a plan. She needed an excuse, something natural, something that wouldn't make him suspicious. An idea formed in her head, and she grabbed her phone, pretending to check a message. She took a deep breath and walked toward the living room, where Richard was crouched near the desk, rummaging through the drawers. "I just got a text from Sarah," she lied, keeping her voice light. "She needs me to come over and help with something." Richard looked up, his expression unreadable. "Right now?" Emily nodded quickly. "Yeah, just for a bit. I won't be long." For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at her, as if he were trying to see inside her head. Then slowly he smiled. "All right," he said. "Drive safe." She forced a small laugh. Always. Walking out of that house felt like moving through quicksand. Every step felt too slow. Every second stretched endlessly. She expected him to call her back, to stop her, to say something that would shatter the illusion of normalcy. But he didn't. He just watched. As soon as she stepped outside and closed the door behind her, she let out a shaky breath. She had done it. She was out. But she wasn't safe yet. Sliding into her car, she gripped the steering wheel tightly. She needed to think. Where could she go? Who could she turn to? The police? Number. She didn't even know how to explain what she had found. A friend? Sarah? Number. She couldn't put anyone else in danger. Her parents lived out of state. She had no siblings. She was alone. She put the car in drive and pulled away from the house, glancing in the rearview mirror. The house looked the same as it always had. But it wasn't home anymore. It was a crime scene, a place where darkness lurked behind locked doors. Her mind swirled with questions. Had Richard hurt anyone? Had he done something even worse than spying? And what would he do if he found out she knew? Emily kept driving aimlessly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She needed to go somewhere safe, somewhere Richard wouldn't think to look. Then she remembered the motel on the other side of town. It was old and mostly empty, the kind of place no one would pay attention to. It wasn't perfect, but it was somewhere to think, to plan her next move. She pulled into the parking lot, her hands still shaking as she checked in under a fake name. The room was small and smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, but she didn't care. She locked the door, double-checked it, then sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing. She had proof. She had seen what Richard had been hiding. But if she wanted to stop him, she needed more. And she needed to do it before he realized she were running. Emily sat in the dimly lit motel room, her mind spinning with the weight of what she had uncovered. The images, the videos, the horrifying proof of Richard's secret. She had seen too much. She knew too much. And now she was sure of one thing. She couldn't keep running. She had to end this. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone. She could call the police, but what would she say? She had no concrete proof of a crime, just unsettling footage, disturbing patterns, and the gut-wrenching feeling that Richard was far more dangerous than she had ever realized. If she made the wrong move, he could talk his way out of it. He was charming, respected, careful. She had to be smarter. Instead, she decided to go back, not to stay, but to gather more evidence. If Richard had been recording people, there had to be something more. Something that would force authorities to take immediate action. The thought of stepping back into that house made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to move. The drive home was quiet, the streets nearly empty under the glow of streetlights. Her pulse pounded as she pulled into the driveway. The house was dark, silent. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of what was at stake. She had lived here for years. She knew every creaky floorboard, every hiding spot. If she was careful, she could get in and out before Richard ever knew she was there. She slipped through the back door, heart hammering against her ribs. The air inside felt heavier, as if the house itself knew what she was about to do. She moved quickly, heading straight for Richard's office. His laptop was gone, but she hadn't checked his desk drawers before. She crouched down, pulling at the handles. Locked. Of course, her eyes darted around the room. Richard had always kept a spare key somewhere. Where would he hide it? Then she saw it, his old leather-bound notebook on the shelf. It looked untouched, but Emily knew better. She grabbed it, flipping through the pages. And there, tucked inside, was a small silver key. Her hands shook as she fitted into the lock, twisting until the drawer clicked open. Inside, she found stacks of USB drives, carefully labeled, with dates, dozens of them. A sinking feeling settled in her gut. How long had he been doing this? How many victims? She grabbed as many as she could, stuffing them into her bag. But just as she turned to leave, A sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Richard was home. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. The house was dark. Maybe he wouldn't come in here. She eased the drawer shut, barely making a sound. Then a light flickered on in the hallway. Emily's heart pounded. She needed to move now. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so now. Thank you.